She's our presenter today. Nancy Frey is a professor of educational leadership at San Diego State University and a teacher leader at Health Sciences High and Middle College, keeping her work grounded in the daily realities of schools and classrooms. She is a credentialed special educator, reading specialist, and administrator in California, and she serves on the International Literacy Association Literacy Research Panel. Nancy and her colleague, Dr. Doug Fisher, have authored numerous articles and an extensive list of books that have shaped the work of educators around the world. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Nancy Frey.
Well, thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you for the warm welcome. Hang around until the end, see if you are a winner for all of that. So I'm here tonight and or today or this morning, depending on what part of the globe that you are coming from. Hello, Pakistan, by the way. And here to talk about Teacher Clarity 101. And so hopefully during our time together, I can kind of dispel some of those myths. Many of you, I imagine, are quite well versed in teacher clarity, but are also kind of fielding some of those questions, addressing misconceptions and those kinds of things. A big misconception is that teacher clarity is only learning intentions and success criteria. Of course, they are important, but they are not the only thing. Here's the gold standard. The gold standard for teacher clarity is using methods so that students can answer, what am I learning today? Why am I learning this? How will I know that I've learned it? The whole purpose of teacher clarity is to shine a light, to create clarity for students so that they can answer those questions. When you know what it is that you're learning, when you know why it is that you're learning it, and you have a sense of how it is that you'll know that you were successful in learning it, it speeds up the rate of learning. How it is that you get there, that can be done and accomplished in a number of different ways. We're going to talk about what some of those dimensions are, and hopefully, you'll be able to walk away with a few tips about how it is that you can help colleagues in being able to understand what teacher clarity is at a 101 level. What's the broad view of that? Now, one of those misconceptions is that those three questions are the only thing that's important. It's all about our foundation as teachers, as educators, our foundation. Because in order for our students to be able to answer those questions, we first have to be able to answer those questions ourselves. And those questions, those clarity questions that we ask ourselves as teacher, what am I teaching today? Why am I teaching this? And how will I know my students have learned this? If we can't sufficiently answer those questions in the company of colleagues in particular, then it becomes terribly difficult to be able to help students to be able to answer those questions. So the foundation is how it is that we are able to answer those questions, because then it equips us with the tools that we need in order to be able to help our students answer those questions. Now, I'm going to have a number of different questions for you to drop into the chat. Remember what Melissa offered earlier. Don't forget to use that everyone pull down as well. But here's your first question. What do you think the question is, in your opinion, that teachers most often skip? By the way, there's no wrong answer, right? It's just your opinion. Is it the what? Is it the why? Or is it the how do I know? And thank you so much. So many of you are responding for that. I'm seeing a pretty even distribution. I'd love to be able to turn this into a poll to be able to find out which one seems to be scoring the highest as well. But I'm seeing an awful lot of whys in there. Why am I teaching this? Such an important question. Right. And it needs to be more than just, well, it's on page 79, and yesterday we did pages 77 and 78, right? When we talk about the why, what's the relevance? What is the relevance of what it is that students are going to be learning? I also am intrigued too with a number of people who noted that sometimes we forget to answer, how will I know that my students learned it? And there's a subtlety in that particular question because my question is not, how will I know that they did it, but rather, how will I know that they learned it? And I think, especially as I reflect back on my early years in teaching, I realized that I kept score based on what it was that you did or didn't do. That's what my grade book looked like. What were the assignments that you completed? What were the scores that you got on tests? But I never really dug into whether you actually learned it or not. Just because you do something doesn't mean that you've actually learned how to do it. So I love the thinking that's going on here. Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to keep up with the chat because so many of you have such great ideas in there. I hope you're taking full advantage of the chat as well. So let's kind of dive down a little bit deeper into this. The intention that Doug and I had was really to be able to develop an illustrated guide as an introduction into teacher clarity. In other words, for educators to be able to see what the broad scope, what the shoreline is when it comes to teacher clarity. The Teacher Clarity Playbook is an important tool to be able to use in that, especially for the how it is to get to those places. But it's really useful to be able to have a sense of the broad scope of what teacher clarity is. And so that was the inspiration really for the illustrated guide. Now, in this time together, and again, if you've hung around with us long enough, you know that we always talk about our own learning intentions and our success criteria. So during our time today, we're learning about aspects of teacher clarity beyond learning intentions and success criteria. We'll talk a bit about that, but we want to broaden the shoreline on that. I've got a couple of success criteria. Doug and I have been working more and more with incremental success criteria. In other words, you don't have to wait until the 55th minute of this webinar to find out whether you were successful or not, but to make sure that success is happening on a regular basis, that you know that you're moving in that correct direction, right? So our first success criteria that we'll address today is, can I explain the evidence that supports teacher clarity? Such an important question to be able to ask, especially those who are newer to teacher clarity. Well, why is this important in the first place? The second success criteria, being able to describe what some of those quality learning intentions and success criteria are. As I said, for many, especially moving early on in that space, learning intentions and success criteria are often the first thing they see. It's the most visible thing that they see. And really importantly, I can identify appropriate assessment tools that allow students to demonstrate their learning. How will I know that I'm successful? It starts with me having that understanding of what I believe success is in terms of learning, not just doing. So let's dive down into this and talk first about what is teacher clarity in particular. I love the drawings that Terrell Hansen did for Doug and for myself as well. In the illustrated guide, you'll see our little avatars in there talking directly to you as a reader about different aspects of teacher clarity. So, when we talk about teacher clarity, in particular, really what we're thinking about is the empirical evidence that really underlies all of this. We often see teacher clarity as being something that is expressed in the classroom itself, but there's a whole lot of research that underpins those particular practices. One aspect of that is around cognitive load theory. The idea that for all of us at any age, there's only so much information that we can take in at any one time. And so, what we have to do is we have to chunk the learning. We have to make sure that we're bringing it down into some bite size but relevant pieces in order for learners to be able to absorb that information, to integrate that information into what it is that they do and how it is that they think. There's a whole field just in cognitive load theory, especially Sweller's work around cognitive load theory. So that's one aspect of the empirical evidence around teacher clarity. A second aspect of that is around self efficacy and perceived control. When we talk about motivation and we talk about interest in particular, that really lies in this particular bucket. How it is that we feel about ourselves as learners when it comes to learning this particular content, this particular subject is essential and predictive of whether we're going to be successful at it or not. One of the things I hope that all of us who are not formal math instructors, I hope one of the things that all of us learned early on is do not tell a young person that you're not a math person. We're all math people. Those kinds of comments can undermine the self efficacy of learners, and it can undermine their belief, their sense of control in their learning itself. A third bucket of empirical evidence is around feedback and around self regulation. Over the last 10 or 15 years or so, the idea of self regulation has become increasingly important. There are lots of research studies that are around both emotional self regulation as well as cognitive self regulation, how it is that you regulate the behaviors that you are using in order to be able to learn. So, self regulation theory, boy, there's a whole bucket in there around that, as well as feedback. Feedback, and many of you know, especially from John Hattie's work, feedback is really a central part of what it is that he does. And what he'll often talk about is that feedback when people see the numbers, because the predictive numbers around feedback are really very high, it is often misunderstood, misinterpreted, because it isn't feedback given, but rather it is feedback received. The message is not, hey, teacher, you need to give twice as much, three times as much feedback as you usually give. It's all about the relationship that the teacher and the student have about whether the student is going to take on that feedback or not. By the way, feedback is also bi-directional. When we talk about teacher clarity, we're talking about feedback going in both directions. As teachers, as educators, we have to pay as close attention to the feedback that they are giving us, and that we need to generate that feedback. We need to step out and make sure that we're getting lots of opportunities to gain feedback from our students, because that's how you make informed decisions about what happens next. And then finally, around expectancy value theory. And this one might seem a little less familiar than some of the others that I talked about, but expectancy value theory is essentially this. Is the amount of effort that I'm going to use worth what the outcome is going to be? We make decisions every day about the relative amount of effort and the relative amount of payoff that we get. So again, it's so important to be able to establish and reestablish with students again and again. Here's why it is that this is valuable. Here's why it is that it is relevant for you. So lots of empirical research that underpins teacher clarity. And then I'll go down that little rabbit hole even further for that. Some great quotes around teacher clarity. As you read silently through these, please notice the range of years from 1981 to 2009. This has been around for decades. This is not something that just showed up on the scene in the last decade. I'll give you a moment, and I'd love to be able to see in the chat what's your favorite, which one really resonates with you. Thanks for getting us started, Cheryl. Right. A lot of people like the Simmons one. Clarity then is the teacher's ability to present knowledge in a way that students can understand. I like the Sapphire one too, and not just because it's shorter. Love that. Love that. So again, another misconception might be, oh, teacher clarity, it's some new thing. No, it's not. No, it's not. Teacher clarity has been around literally for more than 50 years. So here's our definition of teacher clarity. That teacher clarity refers to a teacher's ability to clearly and consistently communicate learning intentions and success criteria and design instructional processes that make learning visible, intentional, and understandable for students. So we use the learning intentions and success criteria as a vehicle, but underpinning all of that is the design of instructional processes. Without those foundations, simply posting things on the board because they said that we had to do it is not going to deliver the kinds of results that one might expect. So we're going to take a look at a couple of different videos during our time together. We're going to start off our journey in Arizona, and we're going to look at a sixth grade classroom who are examining themes around a Charles Dickens story. And what I invite you to do is to be able to note some of the things that you notice students doing as well as the teacher doing that seem to be able to contribute toward clarity.
This is our learning from yesterday, so can I have a volunteer read our learning intention from yesterday?
We are learning to analyze how the theme of transformation is resolved at the end of A Christmas Carol, and how Scrooge's actions reflect his character development throughout the story.
Good. So what was the major theme we talked about yesterday with Scrooge's actions in stave 5?
So Scrooge's actions have been he's been more happy, he's been giving money to people that were in need before, and he's redeeming his past self, since before he didn't give money to the homeless shelters, but now he's doing that since he had to change heart.
Also, he's doing all these things. He doesn't want the things. He just wants the feeling of happiness giving himself.
Okay, so what were his actions and how did they change from the beginning to the end? Diego?
So at the beginning, he was very ungrateful. He did not give to anybody, and he was very grumpy all the time. But after the ghost came to visit him, he saw the consequences, and at the end, he chose to be more grateful and gave more things to everybody.
Good. So he went from being this greedy, grumpy man to now a generous man and using his money for good. Okay? So we're going to apply our theme and character development now to our debate for the day. So if you could write the learning intention for today. So today we're learning to write an argumentative essay that uses Scrooge's transformation in A Christmas Carol to explore the theme of true happiness and the value of material versus emotional wealth. If you're done, go ahead and read through the success criteria and then we'll talk about those. Okay, so discuss with your group. How will you know that you have succeeded in today's lesson at the end?
When we have strong evidence, strong details, quotes. Yeah, we have like a good reason. Good commentary.
And it gives like a good explanation of like why you put those quotes and everything else.
And you have a strong argument over your side. Since we're doing an argumentative essay.
You have such a good understanding of it and you're good at explaining it that you're convincing your reader too.
Persuading?
Yeah, persuading.
All right, so next I want you to look at today's learning intention and yesterday's. What similarities do you see and how will you connect yesterday's learning to today? So flip back in your notes for yesterday's. What connections do you see between those two learning intentions?
So I think the difference is that we were trying to find the theme back then, and now we're using the theme for our essay.
So yesterday you were doing what?
We were looking for it.
Looking for it, and then today
We're using
it. Good.
And we're still kind of focusing on, like, we were focusing on character development, but now we're, like, putting that into perspective, like, how, like, his material wealth before versus, like, his emotional wealth, like, now.
Yeah.
I love that as a secondary teacher, and many of you have identified as secondary teachers, I love that she takes the time to be able to say, here's how what we're doing today links up and syncs up with what it was that we did yesterday, making those connections. This is a teacher who deeply understands that learning is always, always, always going from the known to the new, the known to the new, and making sure, and one of you noted too about the importance of retrieval practice, having students pull out of their heads what it was that they learned before. Especially at the secondary level, it can be challenging for students who may have 5, 6, 7 different subjects during the day, different teachers, different classrooms, and it can become difficult for them to see how what it is that they're learning today is relevant in any way with what it was that they learned several days ago. So one of the ways that we think about relevance is in being able to make those connections. Love that, love that. So one of the misconceptions can be that learning intentions and success criteria are only about the learning that is happening today. It can and should be connected to what it is that they've learned previously, as well as, when it's appropriate, what it is to come. So our first success criteria, explaining the evidence that supports teacher clarity. So we'll just go ahead and drop that right into the chat, some things that you're thinking about. In one phrase, why does clarity increase achievement? What resonated with you? Thanks for getting us started, Marie. Clear expectations. Yeah. Focusing on the learning, helping teachers and students to be able to focus together on the learning, empowering students. Lots of connections. Sandra, I love that. Clarity indicates understanding. And you know who clarity really indicates understanding of? The teacher. The teacher's understanding. And Dawn, as you noted, it cuts the fluff. I love that. Oh, good. I hope you're already feeling like, hey, I've got some different ways of being able to talk with my colleagues about teacher clarity. So let's go a bit further into that as well around learning intentions and success criteria. And here's the emphasis on this one. It's communicating the learning intentions and success criteria. As I said, a misconception can be, oh, if we just post it on the board or put it into the PowerPoint, that somehow that is sufficient. It's always about the communication of that. And remember, communication is always bi-directional. Communication isn't just telling students what it is, but making sure that we're creating lots of opportunities for us to get feedback about what it is that they understand and where it is that they may be using but confusing an idea. I'll draw back for just a moment to the previous video that we just watched. And one of the things that you probably noticed was that the teacher was quite active in circulating and listening in on students, because that's one way that she gets a quick understanding who's getting it, who's not getting it. Do I need to do some reteaching, or can I speed up and go forward? So that communication, students being able to know what it is that they're learning is an essential part of that. And sometimes we'll get questions, Doug or I will get questions about what's the best way to be able to craft learning intentions, learning targets, whatever it is that you want to call them. We are agnostic when it comes to whatever the local tradition is about how it is that you define these. And so in giving some thought to that, we really wanted to consider what are some different ways that people often use these. There isn't one right way to do so, but rather what we encourage people to think about is that second column. What's your focus? Are you, on a particular day, are you teaching about concepts and facts and ideas? Then a stem like I am learning or we are learning about can be really useful. Let's go down the list a bit. If it's around processes and strategies, you're teaching about a process, you're teaching about a strategy, then your STEM instead might be we are learning how to. Slightly different than we're learning about. Let's go down a little bit further. Maybe it's a metacognitive set of strategies that we're using, where we're really hoping that students are going to be thinking about their own thinking, metacognition. We're learning to reflect and assess, right? We're learning to set goals based on feedback. Or maybe it's about transfer of knowledge or generalization of knowledge. We're learning to apply art techniques to create a personal project based on a theme. There are any number of different ways. And again, I'll go back to the gold standard at the very beginning of where it was that I started. The gold standard is, can students reliably describe what it is they're learning, why it is they're learning it, and how they'll know that they're successful? Any number of ways to be able to do that. But we wanted to broaden the menu a bit and perhaps to be a bit more specific about any one of a number of different ways, depending on what your focus is. And another misconception that is sometimes out there is that they need to be SMART goals of one kind or another. Now, when organizations are writing objectives for what it is that they are moving toward, and the organization might be a school organization, it might be a business, any kind of profession, SMART goals are really useful for that. SMART is well known within school improvement, especially around being specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. When you are writing learning intentions, you are not writing SMART goals. You are not writing those kinds of things. Don't twist yourself all up in knots trying to make this happen, there's a different purpose for that. And I'd like to contrast the difference between learning intentions and learning objectives. Learning objectives over there on the right are written for and by teachers for accountability purposes. They are narrower. They often use that technical language, and the focus is on performance and evidence. When we're talking about learning intentions over there on the left, that middle column, these are student facing. We are not writing learning objectives. Those are by adults for adults. We're writing learning intentions. These are at the daily level. The purpose of them is to guide students' understanding, and they're written for students. They are broader, student-facing, and always the message is that it's about growth and understanding. So if that's a misconception that you find within your school organization, that might be something useful to be able to share. SMART goals, learning objectives, nothing wrong with that whatsoever, but your audience is different and your purpose is different than learning intentions, which are daily and they are for our students. And then how will I know that I've learned this? You see 85 and 15%. On there. And that is sometimes referred to as the success-failure ratio. And there's been substantial evidence with animals, with humans, and with machine learning. All three things, they all come out about this level. Optimal learning means about 85% success and 15% challenge. Optimal learning is not 100% success because there's no learning that's happening. But really important to note as well that optimal learning means that students, learners of at any age need to feel successful about 85% of the time. That not only contributes to motivation, but it also allows students to be able to continue to build on what it is that they're learning. Now, here's the challenge. How do you make sure that students understand what success looks like? You've got to generate evidence. You have to create opportunities for students to be able to do so. This time we're going to head over to New York. And we're going to look at a school and a number of different grade levels in how it is that students regularly are running into success so that they know they have a measure, they've internalized what it is that success looks like and sounds like. Let's have a listen. And again, if you'd like to live chat, noting some of the things that you are seeing around teacher clarity and around success, please feel free to drop your wonderful ideas into the chat.
Does it matter what level you are at? No, because some friends may not have the words just yet for them to be able to write their story out. But the important part is that we what?
Level up. The difference between level 1 and level 2 is that level 2 has some of the parts of the words, but this one doesn't even have real words. I mean, there's hardly any vowels in it. It's different to level 1 and 2 because there's more words and it's real words.
Level 4 is good because
more details on the drawing and the writing is good, is better than the level 3. Level 3 there's only 2 trees and there's no words on the drawing. And there's 3 trees on level 4 and there's words on the drawing and the flowers are in the middle and there's 2 flowers, but there's only 1 flower right there.
I noticed like a lot of times they always ask like where they are, like, oh, what level am I? So that's why they can visually see, they can take their writing, kind of compare it to the other ones and kind of see where they are. And they can use it a little bit without having to ask me, they can do it for themselves. And I'll show them like an example of like from a 2 to a 3, and then they'll see like visually, okay, I can see the revisions made, then they'll go back to theirs and try to add more details to theirs.
So we use the level up wall to compare our writing to what level we should be at.
You progress by just keep working on these every time. So you have to look at where you started and then look how you're going now from using the rubric.
Each time you write, you can add on to it and add better vocabulary and better organization and better research till you get to a 4.
The level up wall is to help you reach the standards and reach academic success on any piece of work in any subject. The level up wall basically looks like is 3 different responses, basically starting from 0 to 2. The 0 is that you didn't have all the requirements. Your restated question to the response didn't match the certain requirements towards it. You didn't have text evidence. Your words were misspelled. It has helped us become a better learner by helping us kind of grade our own work. 2-point response means that you have all the requirements, such as you have text evidence to support your response to the question. All your words are spelled correctly. There's no wrong grammar, and you answer the question with good text evidence. It helps the students become more independent. Like Jemai said, less reliable of the teacher, and they become more dependent of themselves.
We come up.
Does it matter what level you are?
So I'll pause right there. That doesn't happen by accident. That is one school in Rochester, New York, that took an approach that says we have to make sure that our students understand what success looks like and sounds like. And there are a number of different vehicles for being able to do so. They especially invest in developing these level up walls in particular. And one of you asked about whether they are student generated or not. They are often, as the year goes on, what begins to swap out are what the teacher's examples were to what are examples that the students have been generating along the way. Dennis also asked a great question too. What do you do whenever you don't have every single student successful at the end of a lesson? Well, isn't that every lesson that we have ever taught? But having the courage to be able to actually generate that evidence and find out what it is that they know and they don't know helps us to be able to inform what it is that happens next. Who are the students that you need to pull up close for some reteaching the following day? One of my colleagues is a math teacher, and he has what he calls Mastery Monday. And every Monday for about the first 15 minutes of class, students regroup themselves based on a problem set that they had difficulty with the week before. And students work together to be able to redo that problem set. And in the meantime, what Joseph is able to do is to be able to circulate around. Dennis, thanks so much for asking that question. And in fact, one of the ways that you get to this is by asking students their evergreen success for this, for any particular success criteria that you have, for them not only to respond, but to self-evaluate. Am I a level 1? Do I still need help with this? Or level 2? I'm getting it, but I need more practice. A level 3, I understand this. Or a level 4, I can teach others. And now your students who are reporting at a level 3 and a level 4 become the peer tutors for those 10 or 15 minutes when you're doing some reteaching with the 1s to be able to support the 2s. So the 4s and the 3s work together in teams to support the 2s. You take on the 1s to do some reteaching. Now, another element of teacher clarity that I think sometimes is lost in the shuffle, especially with learning intentions and success criteria taking up too much space, is that there really are four factors around teacher clarity. Clarity of organization, that's the learning intentions and success criteria. There's also clarity of the explanations and the examples and the guided practice. What we're going to kind of finish out our time with is in talking about clarity of assessment of students, because they really go together. When we talk about clarity of assessment, we mean making sure that students know where they are, where they need to go, and that as the teacher, we understand how to best get them there. And we've written in other places about assessment cycles, especially with Dylan William, and in particular, thinking about the formative assessment that you have really are these multiple cycles that are happening together: long cycle, medium cycle, and short cycle. And so I'll tell you what it is that I mean by that. When we talk about short cycle, think of these as your temperature checks. These are those checks for understanding that might be happening every 10 minutes or so as the lesson is going on, so that you can see who's getting it and who's not getting it. Those are short cycle formative assessments, often called checks for understanding. But what that's coupled with are medium cycle formative assessments. And these are those important midpoints during an instructional unit where you're checking in with students to see if they are moving toward your unit success criteria, your unit success goals. In particular, I would offer as an analogy, when you go on an extended trip, when I go on an extended trip and I put my destination into the GPS, I also take the time, if it's an unfamiliar trip, to be able to look at what are the major points that I will need to be able to go through in order to get to my destination. I live in San Diego. If I'm driving to someplace in LA, I need to know that at one point I'm going to be on the 163, and then I'm going to be on the 805, and then I'm going to move over to the 5. Those checkpoints are much like your medium cycle assessments. They're on the way to the destination. And then there are those long cycle formative assessments. And these might be happening, 6 or 10 weeks at a time. And here's another visual for being able to look at this. So I talked about it from short to medium to long, but we plan long to medium to short. So long cycle assessments, what are those assessments that I'm going to have at different points during the school year? They often involve multiple units of instruction that are happening. And these can include things as well, like benchmarks, your iReady or MAPS assessments that are held 3 times a year, and so on. So I think about those assessments as the larger buckets. And then distributed among them are these medium cycle assessments that happen within a particular unit of instruction. My checkpoints along the way. I need to go on the 163, and then I need to go on the 805. And then those short cycle assessments that are happening multiple times during a particular lesson. Now, the challenge is that what we need to make sure of, because we plan backward and we teach forward, is that there is alignment among all of those as well. We will often, Doug and I will often use an assessment inventory when we have a longer period of time with people. Maybe this is an activity that you would like to do at your site. And we simply ask people to go ahead and do an inventory of their assessments. What often happens is that what people develop or people note is an assessment calendar, not an assessment inventory. So then what they take a look at is my long cycle assessments are asking students to be able to do these things. Therefore, where are the opportunities for a medium cycle and short cycle assessments? If my long cycle assessment, for example, is to be able to write an extended research paper, where are the opportunities for students to engage with writing in argumentative essays, for example, at the medium cycle and the short cycle version? What people often note is that the long cycle assessments that they have virtually nothing to do with the medium cycle and short cycle assessments that are utilized. Our chances of being able to have students successfully work toward those long cycle assessments is compromised whenever medium and short cycle assessments are not aligned to those particular practices. Which means we've got to be better at being able to generate evidence so that we can take action on them. And this is the place where we will finish up. When we talk about, sorry about that, I clicked a little bit too quickly. We need to generate evidence. We need to interpret that evidence, and then we need to respond to that evidence. That is at the heart of teacher clarity. So when we talk about generating evidence, it's certainly those assessment tasks, multiple opportunities for being able to gather up that evidence, having formal and informal tasks, making sure that the tasks and the questions are designed to help students see their learning as being visible, and making sure that our assessment prompts target both surface, deep, as well as transfer levels of thinking. We tend to be really good on generating evidence. I'll be very honest with you. We are less, oh, I forgot about this. In an age of artificial intelligence, don't forget that your favorite chatbot can be a bit of a help for this. Noting that chatbots are pretty good at being able to generate those literal level questions. They're not so good at being able to generate those questions that cause students to have to infer, use complex concepts, and so on. So while a chatbot can be really helpful for some tasks, treat it like an intern. You're the one who's the expert. Treat it like an intern. The second element of that, which we are less well equipped to do, is to interpret evidence of learning. So we've gathered up all this evidence, we've generated all this evidence. What are the patterns that we're noting? What are some of the misconceptions or the gaps that we're seeing in these patterns of learning? Now, here's where AI can be really helpful with doing this as well. AI tends to be much better at being able to analyze for trends. Now, don't forget that you've got student data privacy laws that govern your state or your province or your national curriculum in particular. And so always understand about student data privacy as well, but know as well that it can be really useful at being able to interpret evidence. And then finally, around responding to evidence, because that's at the heart of what it is that we do. We've generated and interpreted that evidence, short cycle, medium cycle, long cycle assessments. How are we responding? How is instruction being addressed and adjusted in real time? What are the supportive responses that we're using around reteaching? As I noted with things like Mastery Monday, small group instruction, differentiating practice, and so on. And making those next steps decisions. Where can I speed up? Where do I need to slow down? Pacing guides are really useful, but they're only a starting point. We have to generate, interpret, and respond to what that evidence is. And what that allows us to do is to get much better at being able to feed back and to feed forward, to be able to understand that feedback answers questions for students about where they're going, how they're doing, and what they need to do next. And that feedback that's paired with feed forward instruction, in other words, what's happening next, help to support progress toward that learning goal. When we talk about teacher clarity, it really is all of these different elements. When we say that teacher clarity isn't one more thing, it's the thing, there's a huge amount of evidence around how it is that learning occurs. We want to tap in to that learning science. So let's put it all together. We're going to finish up our time together by visiting Australia. I told you we'd go all the way around the world together. And what I'm going to invite you to do is to live chat as we watch this next video. Go ahead and name or call out some of those elements of teacher clarity. You're going to see some student self-assessments. You're going to see the teacher generating, interpreting, and acting on that evidence. Those are only a couple of examples. And this time, we're going to watch a classroom with the preps, with the little ones. These are students who are moving into the kindergarten experience. These are 4 and 5-year-olds. So let's take a listen at this incredibly talented teacher.
So a few years ago, I read Ron Berger's book, Ethics of Excellence, and it really inspired me to think about how can I get my children to really care about the sort of learning that they do and to want to do really well at it. Just at the start of prep, it's fairly standard for all prep teachers to get their children to draw a picture of themselves on their first day of school. But being such young people and it's their first attempt at school, they just draw what's in their head. And then the following day, I show the children the Austin's Butterfly video, and they get quite intrigued by the fact that this little boy called Austin tried again and again, and they can see the difference in the work that he produces. What happened after Austin had his very first try? What happened next?
And then he did another one, and another one, and another one.
He did keep doing another one and another one, but Nalia, what did Austin's friends do after he did this one?
They gave him feedback.
They gave him feedback. Were they kind?
Yes.
Do you remember the start of prep? I asked you to draw yourself, and that was Aldo's first one. And then Aldo got some feedback, didn't he? And he tried again. And then Aldo, look at that, darling. And so you've got better and better at drawing. But what's also got better? I asked you to write your name. You wrote your name. Do you think you're being like Austin and trying again? And what can you see, Aldo? What's better?
Yeah, I already got my hands on the yellow one.
You did, you forgot your hands, and then you got better. And what else can you see that you've remembered?
And some on my jacket.
Yes, your school uniform shirt.
Remember about his eyebrows.
He did remember his eyebrows, didn't he? It's really important that they can learn to receive feedback, because then they're getting the mindset of, I can improve. And it's a classroom then where the culture is focused on learning rather than performance. Why do I like them to give feedback? Because if children are talking about the task and guiding others, it means that they're actually articulating how to be successful. So they're more engaged in their own learning and they feel more powerful. They know they can make their learning happen.
As John has noted, feedback is really what holds all of it together as well. When students understand and have clarity about what it is that they're learning and have opportunities to be able to give feedback to one another, as well as to receive feedback and to give feedback to their teacher, the world is opened up for all learners. And Suzanne, I agree with you. Truly lovely. Truly, truly lovely. I can't believe that our time is nearly at an end. I'd love for you one more time in the chat. Go ahead and finish this sentence. Clarity is powerful because... it promotes growth. It helps to drive instruction. It increases learning. It activates learning. Oh, because Doug said so. Yes. Exactly. When you're supporting your colleagues, think about and listen for some of the misconceptions that might be there because they may not yet have experienced all of these different elements of teacher clarity. Teacher clarity isn't one more thing, it's the thing. And so, with that, I want to thank you so much for spending this time together, for spending time together this morning or this afternoon or this evening, whatever time it is in your part of the world. And Melissa, I'm going to turn this over to you because I know that you've got some winners to be able to announce.
And I appreciate everybody attending across the world today. Thank you again, Nancy. And everybody, have a wonderful week.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And thank you, everyone, for changing lives.